It has very, very dark and troubling roots within imperial dispossession. So national parks are founded from the 1870s onwards with Yellowstone and then Yosemite. And when people think of national parks, they tend to think of them as an inherent good that are linked to environmental conservation. But that's not why they're first founded. They are first founded effectively as a kind of internal tourist industry within the United States. And they only become associated with environmental protection much later in the late 19th century, when people realise places like Yellowstone are the last refuges of wolves or bison, for instance. And national parks, people often don't remember that they are carved out from the lands of native peoples. And those native peoples themselves are often forced off those lands, are dispossessed of them. So, for instance, in the 1830s, Andrew Jackson pushes through legislation in America called the Indian Removal Bill. And he justifies Indian removal, what he calls Indian removal, on the basis that if peoples, native nations who are in contact with European settlers, are not moved out of their traditional homelands, they will almost certainly go extinct. And so his solution to that is to coercively move people off their lands onto Indian territory. And then this creates an expectation that native peoples are on the verge of extinction. And in the 1830s, there's a man, a painter called George Catlin, who hears about this, and he's absolutely convinced that this is going to happen. And he starts trekking through the Rocky Mountains and so on. And he comes up with this idea of the national park in the 1830s. And his vision is of a refuge where native peoples can actually continue to live as they do, because he has romantic ideas of how they live and, you know, the idea of picturesque scenes of wilderness and so on. But by the time national parks are actually established in the 1870s, they are a very, very different story. They are not the kind of the national park that Catlin envisaged with native nations, but actually visions of wilderness completely depopulated and through dispossession. So that's a very, very kind of important way in which we encounter dispossession, but don't even see it any longer, because we see it as a good thing, an inherent good, often for thinking about wildlife protection and so on. But it has very, very dark and troubling roots within imperial dispossession.